again. We are here in Willamette Week World Headquarters for the endorsement interview for Oregon House District number 27. And we have with us today Ken Helm and Sandra Nelson. And I'm going to ask both of you to give us a little introduction to yourselves for people who may not know you. And we will start with you, Sandra.
Okay, thank you. I moved here, in 1981 to the Portland area. So I've been living here in Beaverton for about 35 years in the same house with my husband and 2 children. I did a lot of volunteer work, and that's mostly what has characterized my stay here, my life here, is volunteer work, helping the people who are not as privileged as I have been. Those struggling in education, reading, the homeless lately. So that's been my interest. And then of course, most lately, it's election integrity. But my background is an English major with a BA in that and a master's in education.
And I'm sorry, your party affiliation is?
Republican with an endorsement and with the Libertarian Party.
Okay, great. Representative Helm.
You bet. Nice to be with you again. So I've been in the legislature since 2015. I am not a native Oregonian, but pretty close. And I like to tell people that I grew up in Bend, because I did, and went to school at Willamette University, and graduated from the law school about 30 years ago. My career background is in law. I've been a land use attorney until I retired recently from that work, and I've done all sorts of work within that field. I've also dabbled in municipal law and environmental law. Since joining the legislature, that career track has been instrumental in where I've ended up in committees, and so I've ended up chairing the Environment and Energy Committee for a few sessions, and the Water Committee, and now the Agriculture, Land Use, and Water Committee. And I've very much enjoyed that work, and interestingly, in this time when we redistricted, for personal reasons, I moved within District 34, the district that I've represented since 2015, in about 2020, and still in the District 34, but near the edge. And then when we redistricted, I ended up being the Democratic incumbent, or the only Democrat that was serving at that time for the new District 27. So that was a fortunate and nice surprise for me.
Can you define the boundaries of District 27?
It's not a straightforward shaped district, because that's not how the districts were rebuilt. Right. Geographically, they weren't built that way. So I'd say it's easiest to conceive of parts of Cedar Hills and the St. Vincent and West Haven areas in the north, and then the eastern boundary is in and around 96th, 94th Avenue, so that area in between Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and Canyon Road. And then it goes south and takes in downtown Beaverton and all the way through the Greenway neighborhoods and south to near Sexton Mountain, on the south side of Beaverton. So
nice. Yeah. Sandra, did you mention that you were interested in election integrity?
Yes, I am.
Tell us more about that.
Well, as you know, in 2020, there was a lot of discussion of what happened in that election. We saw a lot of anomalies and irregularities that caused a lot of people to question it, not just a few. And so I've been working with other people about that. But one of the most preposterous claims that I've heard recently was that in Washington County, all 175 precincts have the same percentage points of people who are voting. Now that just seems absurd to me. 82% of Republicans, registered Republicans voted, and 84% of Democrats voted. And I haven't had time to check that out, that detail. But if it's true, then obviously we have a huge problem with our election system and tabulators and machines. But I just can't, I have a hard time believing that.
Wait, so you're saying that you've heard this,
I've heard it,
but
yes.
you haven't looked into it?
I haven't yet, because I just learned about this a few days ago, and I would love to have Willamette Week look into this and see if there's truth to it.
Okay. What other election irregularities, because this one doesn't sound like it's been researched, what other election irregularities are you concerned about that have been proven?
Well, that's just it. We're looking for the opportunity to prove it in a court of law. What's happened and what I can't understand is because this is such an important issue for everybody, not just Republicans or Democrats. In fact, Senator Wyden has been one of the most outspoken up until 2019 about election integrity, and there are wonderful videos of him and speeches that he gave about this, how important it is and to have these election machines looked into and so on, because it's a proven fact, that's a true statement, that every single cybersecurity expert admits that every single electronic machine can be hacked.
So Sandra,
Yeah.
you know, Trump and his allies filed over 50 lawsuits alleging voter fraud. All 50
Right.
have been thrown out. So it would seem that the allegations of voter fraud have been tried in the court of law. What are you looking for?
Well, actually, they haven't, because they were thrown out on issues of standing rather than merit. That's a huge difference. But the wheels of justice roll slowly, and more opportunities are coming out now for the actual lawsuits to be heard. So that's an exciting thing. And my point is that because this is so important, you'd think that and the trust in our election system is so important, you'd think that our government leaders or policymakers would be very open to sharing the truth about our elections.
Do you think President Biden is the rightful president?
No, I do not.
So you think Trump is the rightful president?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Based
okay.
on yes,
Okay,
based
we should
on
move
what
on.
we see
Yep.
and what's happened in the elections.
Okay,
And-
Okay.
thank you, thanks.
Yeah.
Representative Helm, do you think Joe Biden is the elected president?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you see any election irregularities in your district or anywhere else that concern you?
I'm not aware of any. This is not an area that I go snooping around in. I've been satisfied over the years in watching our voter by mail system develop that it has incredible integrity. It opens up opportunities to vote for more people than almost any other state. And we almost have forgotten that you used to have to go and sign in and demonstrate that you were the person and vote at a ballot, which is great. I'm glad to have had that experience. But that system was actually more susceptible to fraud and just incompetence than we have now. I'm satisfied that we have election observers in every county. We have people that volunteer to oversee, and this is not an issue in Oregon that has legitimately risen to our Secretary of State as a problem. So I'm not an expert in
got
it, but what I
Sure.
know
Yeah.
makes me feel comfortable.
Sandra, if you were elected, what would be the first bill you would either put forth or look forward to supporting?
I think that I would want to repeal the taxes that are hurting families and businesses. We are overtaxed, in my opinion, in our state here. That bothers me.
Which taxes specifically would you repeal?
This is what our government seems to do, is just require more and more taxes taken from the people for the few elitist government leaders to decide on how that money will be spent. And they choose winners and losers. We see that especially in the field of energy, right?
Which taxes would you repeal?
The cap and trade, for one thing.
Okay.
That's a huge concern to me. In fact, I would like to say that back in 2017, when Representative Helm was in the legislature, he recognized something really important. He said that there needs to be recognition by the state and clear communication to the citizens of the state that any cap and invest program will not affect greenhouse gas emissions or climate change, such that harm to the state from climate change can be reduced. Likewise, the citizens must be informed that a cap and invest program in Oregon will impose increased costs on every business and household in Oregon. It is not just the big polluters that will pay, but everyone will pay. So what we're seeing here is just a huge abuse of government because we were not told that truth. We were told that it's absolutely essential.
I'm sorry, who were you quoting there? Were you quoting Representative Helm?
From
I missed it.
a committee he was on. It's called Environmental Justice and Just Transition Work Group. And he was on that committee.
And can you do you believe in climate change? Do you think our climate is warming?
I believe that there's always climate change and weather change.
Sure, but do you think it's spurred on by do you think it's spurred by human action, emissions? Do you think it's human made?
Not primarily, no.
What do you think it's primarily due to?
I think that it's cyclical. It's the way that we are designed in this Earth and in our solar galaxy, you know, with the sun. That has a huge effect.
Okay.
It's just,
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I just want to be clear here. Were you quoting Representative Helm when you read that statement?
Yeah, she
Who
was.
was that?
She was.
Okay, did you say that?
Yeah, it's hard to remember. There were so many committee meetings that I participated in and led between 2016 and 2019. I happily took up a leadership position to get Oregon on the road to climate action at that time, partnering with Senator Dembro, Michael Dembro. And I probably said a lot of things. It doesn't quite sound right. Here's what I'll tell you some facts though. We don't have a cap and invest program in Oregon now. There is no carbon tax, there's no cap and invest tax, and that's because it didn't pass. The last chance that we had to pass that kind of program was in 2019, and you'll remember that my Republican colleagues felt so uncomfortable with that they walked out, both houses. And we've never gotten back to that. And I don't think that we will, unfortunately. Instead, the approach that was taken is that the governor, through executive order, asked all of the state agencies that have something to do with climate to create action plans. And they've been doing that over the last couple of years. And so that would be, DEQ, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, water, etc. And that's the way we've approached it. So no taxes are involved there. But, I'll sign up to be guilty of still wanting that, because I think a cap and invest program would be the best and easiest and cheapest way for Oregon to address our climate response appropriately. It's a free market system. It worked with acid rain. It solved that problem in a fairly short amount of time, and it spreads the cost very thinly over affected taxpayers and persons.
Can I ask each of you to take a couple minutes to talk about one state agency that you think deserves some more scrutiny from the state legislature about how it's spending dollars, how it's being administered or managed? We'll start with you, Ken.
I'm involved with a number of state agencies in the natural resource sphere. Department of Fish and Wildlife, Oregon Water Resources Department, Department of Environmental Quality, and Department of Land Conservation and Development, and the Public Utilities Commission. I'm not generally a conspiracy theorist about what goes on in those agencies.
We're not asking about conspiracy.
No, but this,
theories.
I wanted you to have the context, because when oversight is needed, it often looks like a conspiracy is forming or that undue negative intent is directed toward the agencies. I more look at it as constructive criticism and questions about how we can have those agencies be more accountable to the public and more transparent. So with that context, I would say that in general, we should pay more attention to the Public Utility Commission. It is an extremely important commission and agency that is in charge of regulating utilities both in the electric sector, but in water and in natural gas. They're not a very sexy agency, and therefore they do their work outside of the limelight. Outside of almost any sunlight, in fact. And I've always worried about agency capture by the regulated.
Sorry, what do you mean by that, agency capture?
It means that there's such a close relationship between the regulated entities and the regulators in the way that they do their work that it becomes seamless, and the agency loses its perspective as a regulator and an enforcer.
So what do you think your overarching concern is about what that kind of cozy relationship might result in?
Well, the reason that we have a Public Utility Commission when it comes to those regulated energy producers is because they're in the open market and they impose rates. And back when we were trying to energize the country, there was a deal struck. You provide your energy to the last foot of service, last mile, last foot. We know that's going to be expensive, and therefore we're granting you a monopoly. You're guaranteed a rate of return. Typically, this is between 7 and 9% annually, and so in order for the producers of energy not to place too high a burden on their customers, both residential, commercial, and industrial, these public utility commissions were introduced, and it is their job to do a couple of things. One, to make sure that the provision of energy is safe and reliable, and that it is at a reasonable cost. And the way that they assess these costs and oversight of the regulated is mostly to review plans that the regulated entities bring to them. And it's complicated, that's to be admitted. But over time, and because of the lack of public scrutiny, I get concerned about the level of coziness between the staff and the regulated parties, and that's a moral hazard.
Is that relationship outdated now that we have electrified the whole country, and that mission is sort of accomplished, and now their mission is how do we cope with climate? Do you think that the PUCs are not clued in there, or aren't? Is that where your concern lies, or no? Or is it completely independent of climate?
That's a really interesting question, because here in Oregon, we've tasked our PUC with some climate action duties, and we're relying on them to meet, in particular, our clean electricity goals by 2040. And so, yes, there's a little bit of tension there, and I think the legislature is in part responsible for this, in that their mission has always been reliable energy at a reasonable cost. Now we're laying on these climate goals, and we haven't adjusted their agency mission to meet the climate goals. And what we've seen a clash already between the climate goals, which most Oregonians understand are necessary, and the needs to keep rates low for mostly our most vulnerable residential customers. We have not harmonized that, and it's work that needs to be done.
Sandra, can you tell us about a state agency that you think needs some more scrutiny, and why?
Okay, I kind of agree with what Representative Helm was just saying, but it is a problem because I think that our government legislature and our executive has taken over, which has taken over some of the legislative, duties, has actually put into effect then this cap and invest or cap and trade program, which I think is overreach of the executive branch into the legislative
So
branch.
can you talk about a specific state agency, Oregon Department of Education, Oregon Health Authority, that you think needs to have a microscope put up?
Well, okay, but it's just to go back to that energy thing. I am very concerned about that because the legislature is putting onto these agencies rules that they really should not be doing in the first place. We are creating a lot of our own tensions and problems, is what I'm saying. But yeah, I do think that a lot of our agencies need to be audited. In fact, including the Secretary of State's office. I think that there's overreach going on in that office too, in directing, for instance, county clerks, what they can and cannot do, which is overreach also. And so I would like to see a lot more accountability in our state legislature and executive branch. Because, well, I can tell you a story about one legislator I met recently, and we were talking about the cost of government and where the monies are being spent and how they're being spent. And he just threw up his arms and walked away and said, we have no accountability. We don't know how the money is being spent. There isn't any accountability.
What legislator was this?
That's a concern.
Who was the legislator?
Oh, I don't remember his name, but no, I talked with several, you know.
Sure, but you don't remember who you were talking to.
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. Was he a senator, representative? What was his title?
He was a representative.
Okay.
Yeah.
When
We
you're
were interviewing with a whole bunch of them.
when you're out knocking on doors, what's the main concern you hear from in your district?
The main concern, and as you may remember, I had a primary contest this time and got out and knocked doors and talked to people in that new part of the district and old. In Beaverton, I think the dominant concern is that Beaverton not become like Portland when it comes to houselessness. And you know, I think the citizens of Beaverton and Southwest Portland are as compassionate as any people around, but they don't see what they perceive to be a problem of both houselessness, addiction challenges, and transient behavior and urban camping. They don't perceive it at that time as getting solved, and they perceived Portland to be out of control, frankly. So that was the dominant concern. And
what is it like in Beaverton these days, generally, in terms of homelessness?
I think we're trending in a good direction. I follow the lead because, you know, at the state legislative level, we're in charge of providing some necessary funding to help with houselessness and addiction challenges, which we have done. And then implementation really falls to the counties and the cities and the community planning organizations. But I had the opportunity to do a walking tour with Senator Lacey Beatty a couple of months ago, and I'm really impressed. I was involved with helping get some money for the shelter that the city purchased, and the purpose of that was to provide overnight housing for houseless folks, and then through that to really start to triage who needs the help the most. The city also has supplemental programs such as safe parking for folks that are living out of their cars, which sadly happens to be a lot of seniors.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And so I have noticed that urban camping has decreased markedly. One of the strategies that Washington County and Beaverton are employing is they've got people on the street, folks that work for the city who have some training, and it's their job to contact folks that they see that are in houseless condition and know them, know what's going on with them, and see how they can help them move beyond that. Now, it's not going to work for everyone, and certainly my understanding of folks that are suffering the most from meth and fentanyl addiction they're not really capable of helping themselves out of that situation very well, and they may not accept help. So under those auspices, the mayor has this very simple, elegant, and I think really uplifting notion of dignity. That our community should be a dignified community. Everyone in it is entitled to dignity and respect, including folks that find themselves houseless. But dignity also means that we don't want urban camping in the end. We want it to be solved. And I'm proud that the city's working in that direction.
Okay. What are you hearing, Sandra, from when you go knock on doors? What are people's concerns?
Very similar to what Representative Helm just said. Homelessness is huge, and people don't want exactly what he said. They don't want Beaverton to turn into Portland. And associated with that is also safety and crime. I've talked with a number of people who are so discouraged that the crime is actually growing here now in Beaverton, and they tell me their stories. One guy I talked to was a former addict, moved from Gresham because he said it was too dangerous to live out there anymore with his children. Moved to Beaverton, and he said, and now I'm beginning to see needles out here where I live. And he said, I don't know where I'm going to go next, where I'm going to run to next. He actually said that. And of course, the drugs that go with it. People are extremely concerned. I just talked with a guy yesterday who said that he spends half his nights in the park watching what's going on because the drugs are being sold at night there. So we are having more and more of these problems. And I think that we do need to hold people accountable. We need to have the laws in place, and we need to be able to enforce those laws, recognizing the individual's dignity, but also the rights of the community to have a safe place to live in and a place where their children can play. So this is a big concern. And because I'm a person who has worked with the homeless, I'm a referral agent for 2 different organizations. This is huge to me. This is a huge concern. And I'm like others, are looking for answers that are doable and realizable. And one thing I'm learning is that the government is not very good at solving these kinds of problems. They want to throw money at it, but they don't have the infrastructure together, and they make a lot of requirements on different organizations that are not that are not the best solutions, which is why I'm a referral agent for 2 different organizations that do not receive any government funds. And I asked them, why not? And they said, because with government funding, they tell us how we need to help the people we're supposed to help, and it doesn't work.
So how would you tackle what you see as sort of those administrative hurdles in order to?
I'm looking for, and I found different possibilities. One I listened to was through Cascade Policy Institute. They came up with an idea where you take those who are homeless, and I realize you're going to be making hard decisions for people, but as Representative Helm said too, when people are on drugs or have mental challenges, they can't make good decisions at that point. And for us to expect that is unkind and uncompassionate, really. So what Cascade Policy Institute has suggested was opening up the Expo Center in Portland because it's huge and not used that much, and to allow families and people who are hurting to go inside that building where they have space for thousands of beds, and the surrounding area, in the parking area. You could also use that for tents and so on, and the vehicles that a number of people are living in. And when they get there, offer them services and their choices and options for how they would like to resolve this issue, because that then protects the community. It cleans up the community, makes them safer. You have them all in one place, and then you begin to offer them options. One of them I've heard about through True University, I listened to that, True Charity University, has suggested that you meet with people and see if they have any people left in their own support group, family members and so on, and try to get a connection there and to rebuild that very broken and hurting relationship. And so if possible, you want to reunite people with their families and support groups. Another thing then is wraparound services. We could also have then at the Expo Center a number of different organizations which could offer help to the homeless in various ways. It may be, this is something I've learned too, every situation is unique. You can't just fit everybody, one size fits all solution. It doesn't work that way. And so you find out what their specific needs are. There may be families who just, a guy lost his job or couldn't pay their rent or something. So then that's one unique situation and needs special attention.
That's okay. Representative Helm, what do you think about turning the Expo Center into a shelter?
I think suggestions like that have been made already. I don't know whether it's feasible or not. Let me just say I prefer that the way that Beaverton and Washington County is doing it. There are more than one shelter. Beaverton's just one of several. And they're committed to communicating with each other so that folks that, where there's not room in one shelter, a referral can be made and folks won't just be bouncing around. They'll know where they're going and there'll be help in multiple locations. I think that's probably a little bit easier to help folks, to get everybody to travel to the Expo Center, and then the logistics of housing folks in large numbers at a place that large. I think it presents a lot of challenges, just from the scale of it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
What's Portland doing wrong in regards to homelessness as far as sheltering people and housing people? I mean, Beaverton obviously has a much less severe problem, and a lot of those, obviously Portland is more urban, there's more shelters, of course people are going to congregate there, but do you think we're working our shelter system effectively and helping people effectively, or no?
Well, I think the truth of the matter is in looking at the circumstances on the streets, and it's hard for me to say that they're being effective. Mm-hmm. I can't put my finger on what's going wrong or have a better recipe. I will say this: for one reason or another, Portland is overwhelmed, and I don't know how many of the folks that are homeless, houseless, drug addicted in Portland are Portland natives. But I did ask someone knowledgeable. About a year ago we had a forum, and both with the Justice Department in Washington County and others, are these our own folks or are they traveling? In Washington County, the suggestion was about 65 to 70% of houselessness are residents. There are folks, but 30 to 35% are somewhere else. And so you can do what you can with folks as you encounter them. You got to take folks as you find them. But I think one of the messages that needs to go out, and this is for any city that's having these types of challenges of being overwhelmed, is the notion that, look, this place isn't an easier place to be homeless than anywhere else. And if you're a road warrior, and we know who they are, they're young men in their 20s and early 30s that have decided to have this lifestyle, and they're traveling to where it's easiest.
To have decided to be homeless, or
Yeah.
where do you think they're coming? Where do you think
All
they're
over
coming
the
from?
place, all over the
And
country.
do you think you think it's a conscious choice for them to decide
Some
to
of
be
them.
homeless? Okay.
Some of those folks that might be within the 30%. And the reason I say this is not just because I've heard it or something. About 10 years ago, I read an interesting article in Esquire, and it was about this phenomenon and these young men and their motivations. And it described this point of view. And this was sort of on the cusp of the new meth right? The new formulation that isn't the fun time party drug that we heard about from the 90s and 2000s. This is the new stuff coming out of China, and the fentanyl. And it really changes the way they look at the world,
Coming
turns
out of
them.
China?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
China. There's a great book, Sam Quinones. It's called The Least of Us.
Oh, yeah.
And so I read this book because I was curious, and a lot of my information comes from there. And he confirms what I read in this Esquire article. And what struck me most about this article was at the end, the interviewer said, sort of as a parting comment, well, where are you headed next? And this young guy said, I'm going to Portland. I hear it's easy there. And you can't help but wonder if the word is out about places like San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. And so if that's the case, it's no wonder we're overwhelmed. And
So you think there's a migratory aspect to our homeless population?
some part of it, yeah.
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah. And again,
go ahead.
yeah, and again, you take folks as you find them, and talk to our emergency responders. There's people in crisis, and it doesn't matter where they're from; they're in crisis. So we need to help them.
On this note about attracting people, a question for both of you: did you support Measure 110, and would you again? Sandra, do you want to take that?
Yeah, no, I was very, very opposed to Measure 110 because I thought it was deceptive, for one thing, to the people. They had no idea that they were decriminalizing drug use, hard drugs. The people I spoke with afterwards, after the elections, I said, why did you vote for 110? Well, it gave us more beds for people, and for people who have mental health challenges and drug addictions and so on. I said, well, actually it doesn't give more beds. That's not part of it. And did you know it decriminalized hard drugs? They said, no, I didn't know that. So there was this disinformation. I actually spent my entire stimulus check that I got from the government, federal government, to pay for a voter's pamphlet statement that denounced it and told people what effect it would have on families and children, and how it would hurt that parental child relationship, actually, as children began to say to parents, hey, I can use this stuff. It's legal. We can get away with it now. It's all right. And that is exactly what's happened, is that more and more people have been using those. We have more and more people dying from overdoses, and it has had a horrible effect, I think, on our state. And it's heartbreaking to see that. So I was very, very opposed.
And you said you spent your stimulus check to get a statement in the voter pamphlet when it was on the ballot?
Yeah, I spent my entire stimulus check on that, $1,200. Just to make that statement, to try to warn people. But of course, I was way out, all of us were outspent, because this was not an organically grown bill or measure in the first place. It came from New York actually, New York City, and it was George Soros funded and his people. And they have spent us way, way more than we could possibly come up with, and it really, it's sad when that happens.
All right. Same question to you.
So the way I think of 110 is it has three parts. One, it has the ability for psilocybin to be used therapeutically, which I think.
Wasn't that a different?
Yeah, that was a different.
That was 109.
That was a different bill.
Yeah.
I think they were conflated, and maybe I conflated them. But I think that was the messaging. And people are very attracted to that, of course. We want to help folks that have chronic depression and so forth, and psilocybin helps with that. Then the other components of 110 that we're still wrestling with are taking the marijuana tax money and putting it into recovery services. And then the decriminalizing effect of how law enforcement interacts with some folks that are obviously in possession of harmful drugs. is also the case. So on the side of the recovery services, I think we're probably going to end up having another conversation at the legislature, and the question is, do we need a fix there? Because not only do the recovery services have a hard time getting off the ground at OHA, Oregon Health Authority, but they're very expensive, and there's a question about whether they're being provided in the best way, the services. So in the meantime, in reshuffling the money that cities and counties got from the original marijuana tax money, they've been reduced. That amount has been reduced. So that punched a hole in some of the services that they had provided at the local level. And we were able to backfill a little bit of that, I understand, at the legislature. But they're still in need of money to have the outreach and the services that they were providing at the time. So we get to talk about that. The decriminalization aspect is interesting because at this very same meeting that I was telling you about with the folks in the administrative court, or the court administrator's office for Washington County Courts, 2 judges were present with us to explain some of their perspectives. They felt like, through their own research and their own experience, and their research with drug courts around the country, and their own experience, that they had something to give there. And that if there was a way to entice, maybe not be the right word, but engage with folks in possession of methamphetamine in particular, that the court could help facilitate services and provide a pathway out for them. As it stands, they felt helpless. And the interesting other factoid that goes on with that is that in the Judiciary Committee upon which I serve, we've got some statistics coming back around interactions on Measure 110, particularly on methamphetamine and heroin, where we're starting to understand that the offer of help that is given when an officer encounters someone that would have formerly had been in possession of illegal methamphetamine, for example, information is given at that time when the encounter happens about the availability of services and do you want help. Some extraordinarily low percentage of folks that have these encounters are taking them up. Mm-hmm. And we continue to gather those statistics. You have to look at that and say, that's not working as intended. We thought folks would come on in, that if help was offered, they would come in. But for folks that are challenged with meth addiction, and particularly in fentanyl, they're not coming in. So we may have to think about a different approach.
You think that might end up in the legislature having to...
I would not be surprised.
Cope with that.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have each of you ask the other, your opponent, a question? And please phrase it as an answerable question, not necessarily a statement of fact. So just truly a question for your opponent. We'll start with you, Representative.
I always ask the same question when I get it. And Sandra, this has to do with your nomination by the Libertarian Party. So after you're elected, which caucus would you caucus with? I'm thinking not the Democrats, but would you caucus with the Republican caucus?
Depends on how you define caucus. I know, this is what I've heard, that the caucus leaders seem to control all of the government, all of the decisions of each of their parties, and that bothers me a lot. I think that that squelches discussion and censors information. I have a problem with that, and I understand that the Democrats have said the same thing. One of the representatives, whose name again I don't remember, criticized his caucus for the same reason that I would criticize my own caucus. that we need to be able to be more open and share information and ideas and be independent, be able to vote the way we think is best for the people, not the way the caucus.
Okay?
Thanks. And then Sandra, a question for Representative Howe.
Well, let me think now. I would like to know on what basis decisions are made for the people. How do you gauge what is right and wrong and good and bad? What is your objective standard for that? And I'll tell you, I come from a perspective that believes in God and that believes in objective standards, not subjective. And what concerns me is that what I've been seeing in the state, and please help me to understand this better, Ken, if you would, that the state wants to take over more and more of the responsibilities of the family and the communities of faith and so on, and that they don't really encourage the respect of these other organizations.
So Sandra, sorry, can you restate your question, then we'll have the representative. We kind of
So
got to keep going.
my question is then, on what basis, what is your standard of making decisions?
Well, we have a structure of government for a reason. That starts with the rule of law. Statutes and rules govern most of what we do at the legislature, as in and most of the rest of the operation of government. And those are fully transparent. The Secretary of State can audit any agency that she wants. We have our own internal review of legislative actions. We have a committee system in which legislation is vetted. Again, it's fully transparent. And the way that I make decisions is both starting with the rule of law and where we stand now, and then evaluate proposals that come forward based on the best data available. And that should be scientific, peer-reviewed when we can get it. And very importantly, the public interaction with the legislature is key. It's not just because we've always done it that we have open committee meetings with public testimony dominating many of them. And we have a system in which folks can submit testimony at any time, and that becomes part of the record. And then we vote publicly. You know how I vote on every vote. It's transparent, and I am to be held accountable for that. So, the worst kind of decision making is irrational decision making, in my mind. And that can be driven by subjective standards. And when it does, you often get effects that are either unintended consequences or programs that don't work very well. So that's why I agree with objectivity, but I also believe in the process very firmly. I think when you give Oregonians a chance to participate in government in a meaningful way, most of the time they get it right.
I would agree with that. Thank you. And that is one of my concerns, is that we have not been given that opportunity to participate in a meaningful way, especially these last 2 or 3 years with COVID and the restrictions and so on. We feel very alienated from our government, and that's a huge concern.
Thank you.
Fun question?
Yeah, fun question.
Ask the fun question.
Sure, okay, fun question.
Last fun question here.
It's a quick one. If the world were ending tomorrow, what's the last food you would eat? We'll start with you, Sandra. Last food, not entire meal, just food.
I love pizza.
Pizza. What kind of pizza?
Thanks.
What kind of pizza?
Pepperoni.
Okay, nice, classic. And representative?
It's got to be vanilla ice cream.
Oh, anything on it?
I'm a plain guy.
Purist.
Which brand?
I have eaten Tillamook for a long time. I don't even look at another ice cream. It's not that I'm...
Only eyes for
Look at
children.
them.
All right, well, thank you both so much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good conversation.